I would like to welcome you to our first Meet the Entrepreneurs of this year's of this Entrepreneurship 101 year. We're very excited to have you all in attendance, and we have a number of webcasters online as well that we're happy to welcome tonight. So for anybody that came to this event last year, we've changed the format a little bit based on your recommendations. It's very difficult to get a group this big networking, but we're going to try. So basically, we've extended the session. The actual presentation will be from 6 to 7:30 to give us more time for questions. You've seen the name tags that we're trying to mark people out in the different ICT sectors so that you can more readily see who's doing what. Christa is the practice lead of our ICE sector, which is Information Technology, Communications, and Entertainment, and she will be moderating a panel of 3 hot startups that we're very excited to have talk to today. But we'll first start with an icebreaker activity to get you to meet a couple entrepreneurs in your area, and we highly recommend that when we finish the panel discussion here at about 7:30 or earlier, if there are fewer questions, and when the networking starts, to get you to get out and talk to a couple more people in your sector. Don't be shy. So there will be a cash bar with snacks outside as soon as we're done questions. And just to go over what the categories of stickers are in case you're wondering, we have software as a service as blue, mobile is red, software and enterprise is yellow, e-health or health IT is green, digital media is black, and other is white, but other also refers to other sectors at Mars, clean tech, social innovation, and others like that. So with that, we'll get started, and I'll just quickly introduce Christa Jones, who is an advisor and the practice lead of our ICE practice here at Mars. Christa has a wide variety of technical, operational, and marketing expertise in technology-based businesses. She's known for her comprehensive knowledge of existing and emerging ICE services infrastructures and her ability to conceptualize and build companies. Her track record includes creating and executing service developments, next-generation technology implementations, and corporate strategies. She is also a successful entrepreneur. So with that, I welcome Christa Jones to the stage.
This group gets bigger every year. This is quite exciting. Well, welcome to everybody. It's, the fact that we had to go to stickers this year is just indicative of how much is happening in this sector. So one of the things that we're going to do is, based on the feedback from all of you that you wanted to have more time networking, not only with the people on the panel, but with each others, for the first 10 minutes or so, the action is all yours. So before I introduce the panelists and before we get on to the formal part of the program, you all have a little bit of work to do. So everybody look around you. Your objective right now is to get up out of your seat, find somebody in the room who has an interest in has the same color as you on their sticker, and talk to them about what they're doing, find out what their business is, what their ideas are, and what they're working, and try to create some lasting connections. So it's literally, and we're going to come around and get you out of your seats. So you have to get up and do the networking. Well, hopefully you've got a start on talking to other people tonight. We have 3 entrepreneurs that are going to share their story with you this evening. By coincidence, we have 2 females on the panel, which I'm quite excited about. Oftentimes in the ICT and the ICE world, it's dominated quite heavily in the tech world by male entrepreneurs, but we do happen to have 2 females on the panel tonight that are quite exceptional, multi-time entrepreneurs themselves. One of the things that tonight is all about is really learning the entrepreneur story. So this isn't about the technology that they use, this isn't about the way that they've done what their particular value proposition is, but it's really about their personal journey, so that you can learn from their mistakes, the things that they found difficult, challenging, things that they had to do, and things that they would do different, as well as learning from some of the things that they encountered along the way and did really well. So I'm going to start off, and if you guys can come up as I introduce you, that'd be great, or maybe come up ahead of time, because we'll figure it out. So the first one is Christa Jones she's the CEO of G-Shift Labs. She's the co-founder and CEO. G-Shift Labs has an SEO software web presence optimizer, and it's changing the way people think and perform organic search optimization. G-Shift believes marketeers should have control over their SEO campaigns, just as if they control over email marketing. This is Christa's third software startup, having successfully exited from her 2 previous ventures, and she really is as young as she looks.
Wow.
Founded in 2009, G-Shift has over 200 clients and is funded by Mars, the IAF fund here, GrowthWorks, and FedDev IBI. On this side is Joanna, although I'm sure you'd know that that's Joanna and that's Kirk. Joanna is the co-founder and CEO of Deluxe. It was launched in May 2011, and it's the first online destination of its kind in Canada. It offers women's contemporary fashion, accessories, and lifestyle products. And I have to say that just this morning, one of the guys on my team went by me with a Deluxe box that he had delivered to the building, which I thought was really quite funny. I wanted to know what was in it, but I didn't think I should ask. After earning a BA in mathematics at the University of Western Ontario and an MBA in finance at the Schulich School of Business, Joanna built a successful career in marketing. In 2004, she founded Sweet Spot, 3 websites, Sweet Spot, Sweet Mama, Sweet Home, 6 newsletters, and over 100,000 subscribers later, sweetspot.ca is a thriving destination for Canadian women to stay in the know about their city. The company was sold in 2011 to Rogers Publishing. Welcome, Joanna. The mail on the
Token mail.
the token mail, which actually didn't work out this way. Like, this was just, there was supposed to be another mail, but we're okay, is Kirk Simpson. He's the CEO of Wave Accounting. Wave Accounting is Kirk's 3rd startup. In between entrepreneurial ventures, he has worked with some of Canada's biggest media and corporate brands, primarily in the areas of strategic alliances, business development, sales, and marketing. In July 2009, along with James Lockery, Kirk started Wave and led it to almost 80,000 small business signups and nearly $7 million in funding in its first year. Yes, in Canada, $7 million in funding in its first year. So I think we have lots of questions for Wade. So maybe I'm going to get to, the format's going to be is that we're going to get them each for 3 to 5 minutes, talk a little bit about their personal entrepreneurial journey. Then we're going to have a couple of my Ken questions, just so I get my questions answered first. And then we're going to go to the audience. One of the things we do ask, though, during the Q&A is that you go to a mic, since we're webcasting this, and we want to make sure that everybody can hear the questions as well as the answers. Kirk?
Oh, I get to go first?
You get to go first.
Okay. Okay, so July 2009, myself and my co-founder, James, who was a good friend of mine, decided to start Wave. We're on the older side of entrepreneurs. We've both got 3 kids and wives, and it was a difficult decision to make, as you can imagine. Thankfully, we have patient and understanding wives through the process. And so I think a lot of, I don't know if that's me, or a lot of our journey was around, how did we mitigate risk? How did we come up with an idea that we thought could scale that was a good hybrid between James's skills, whose background is in sort of tax prep and that kind of stuff, and my skills more in media and building tech teams and not wanting anything to do with accounting. And so I think that was an interesting journey for us to find the right model that worked for us, the right risk profile that we could basically sell to our wives was an okay proposition. And the rest has been a really interesting, sort of fun ride over the last 12 to 15 months since we sort of gave up our day jobs. I think one of the interesting things that I've found, I was thinking about this a couple days ago, was that, doing business with friends is hard. Our wives go back to university together, and so there's a long connection there between James and I, and a lot at risk if the relationship doesn't go very well. And I remember thinking to myself that I now have more respect for James than I did when I walked into this, and that's always a good sign that you've made the right sort of selection in your co-founder. And so I'm sure we'll dive into sort of other details, but that's basically sort of my journey over the last sort of 24 months.
It's a good journey.
Thanks.
My turn? I'm turned on? Is the mic turned on? Sorry. Wow, that's the wrong way to start. So maybe there was something in the water in July 2009, because G-Shift started in July 2009 as well, so we are just over 2 years old now. And in terms of my journey, sort of before G-Shift, as Christa mentioned, this is my third startup. And I don't think I really could do anything other than be an entrepreneur and do startups. Because it really is in my family, and I grew up with it, and I really don't know anything else. In fact, I often describe myself as unemployable, to the point where, and in a good way, my previous companies were purchased by a US email marketing company, and I lasted there as an employee only because I took 2 very short mat leaves. So I sort of used that time to start a family, and then when that was over, I was back out starting another company. So entrepreneurship for me, and what I tell people, is that it is very much a lifestyle. And if you're thinking of starting a business and thinking of being an entrepreneur, or you already are, it's really important to get buy-in from your spouse, your family, and so this goes to what you were saying, Kirk, but it is so important. My husband's a lawyer, so he absolutely hates risk, but he believes in me because I've done it before. And it was really a matter of getting his buy-in to say, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this a third time. At the time we had a 17-month-old and a 5-month-old, and so it was a big commitment. But it can be done, definitely a lifestyle, and definitely get buy-in from your spouse, your family, because it's really, really difficult to be an entrepreneur. There's so many highs, so many lows, and they have to be on your team in order for your business to succeed. And the co-founder as well, that's, so lifestyle, get the buy-in. The co-founder is so important. I have a great co-founder. This is, again, our third company together, and there's a perfect balance, strengths and weaknesses, and I wouldn't rather be in business with anybody else other than him, and I'd be hard-pressed to go and do a fourth one without him, because it is such a strong relationship, and really means a lot in terms of getting funded and proving that you have a great idea and your customers trusting you and investors trusting you. So that's our journey. It doesn't get any easier the first, the second, the third time. It in fact gets more and more difficult because you set the bar even higher for yourself. So don't think that it's ever going to get easier. And if you are truly an entrepreneur, you always will be setting the bar, and you always will be looking to fulfill additional challenges. So that's our story so far.
All right. Well, I definitely wasn't starting a business in July of 2009 because I had a 4-week-old at that time. So my first entrepreneurial venture was when I started Sweet Spot in 2004. And I think for me, the recipe for how I fell into the entrepreneurship and how I've managed it since then is I had worked in advertising for a number of years, and I always knew within myself, similar to Christa, I had entrepreneurs in my family, and I really admired that when I saw it in other people, whether it was within my family or just people in the community. I always was really impressed by these entrepreneurial ventures, and also more so for me, brands. I was always, and still am, amazed how someone just takes an idea and creates a brand that people are connected to and emotional about, and that is what I've continued to do now in my career. So there was that fascination and passion, coupled with, I think I'd like to say I kind of have trouble with authority. I did very well in my advertising career, but whenever someone told me, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, I get very edgy. So I like to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And I think the third thing for me was I realized about myself what motivates me and gets me going is the upside. Now, I didn't want to be a salesperson per se and work on commission, but I understood that I would rather work really hard and burn my brains out for a few years for a large upside than work the next 25, 30, 40 years of my life at the same secure level. It's just the way I'm built, and it just is what makes me tick. So in the case of Sweet Spot, that's what I did. I started it, I was still working in advertising. I was trying to do both, and it took off, and I sold it to Rogers, and then I was gonna take a breather, but being a junkie for this thing, was approached by a friend who had an idea for something similar to what Deluxe is, but not quite the same, and I rejected him a few times, and then finally couldn't resist anymore. It's like being an addict, and I said okay. And for me, I would say the co-founder partner process or relationship has probably been more challenging than it sounds for these two. In the Sweet Spot situation, I started with a co-founder who was there for 8 weeks and decided that she actually liked her day job and jumped ship. It was probably a blessing, and fortunately we now are still good friends, but there was a large hiccup and a very big risk because she was a close friend and now is again. And then in this situation with my co-founder, my friend who had approached me, it has had its set of challenges with our friendship, but more so understanding the roles and starting off as equals, but if it's not equal contribution, and how do you deal with that? So I've had to go through a lot of very awkward conversations to get to a place that works for both of us. So I have mixed feelings about having business partners.
Great. So I'm going to start the conversation part, just picking up on a little bit of a trend that went through all three of you, which is this whole idea of work-life balance. All of you have children, right? In terms of and all of you have some level of financial commitment in your personal life. In terms of Kirk with wife and 3 kids, he said, and and Christa said 2 when you mentioned 1. Well, you mentioned
One,
pregnancy with 1.
Pregnancy of 1, and then 2 stepchildren who are there half the time. So I guess that makes 2.5 on average.
So the question I have is, in an entrepreneurial venture where you're sometimes when you're looking for the first customer or looking for that next financial dollar or looking for the things that need to be done, and there's not a big team for you to delegate to, how do you manage work-life balance? Anybody want to start?
I'll start.
Sure.
It's very challenging. It's probably the thing that causes me the most anxiety, especially right now. When I started Sweet Spot, I was single. I was renting. I didn't have a mortgage. I had very little responsibility except for myself, so it was very easy to just be very selfish with my time and to live on a real shoestring. This is completely different. I now have a family, and I get torn. I get kind of bitter when I'm pulled into stuff when I have to travel and I'm not home at night. And how I reconcile it in my mind is, I actually read a really great article last year by Barbara Moses. She's a well-known career coach. She's written a number of books, and she had said, you can't be in 2 places at once. So when you be in the moment. So when you're at work, give work your full focus. When you're at home, give home your full focus, and know that both are not going to be completely satisfied at the same time. So that's how I try to work through it. I know, okay, for example, this week is a crazy busy week for me. I've been running around. I'm here tonight. I'm not going to put my son to bed all week, but on Saturday we're going on vacation for a week, and I know that I'm going to spend that time and make it quality time. I'm not going to be on my BlackBerry when I'm with him, and so I try to get in each moment and be present in those moments.
Great. Christa?
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. And I was in the same boat when I started my first company back in '99. I was single, no children. I spent most of my spare time doing a lot of running, a lot of mountain biking, fast forward a decade and a bit. And it is really tough to be a mother, as I'm sure it's tough to be a father, and balance it all. I like to think that G-Shift makes me a better mother, and being a mother makes me a better entrepreneur. This is how I sort of justify it in my mind. And I think in both roles, I am more productive doing what I'm doing at that time. So when I go home, and I do literally run out the door at work at 5:15, except for tonight, and I go home and I play with my kids, I make them a good dinner, I'm just there for them for bedtime. And we're together for you know, it's a small amount of time. It's 3 hours during the week, and that makes me feel guilty even thinking about it. But I do focus I'm much more focused in each role than I think I was before. And travel is really difficult as well. A lot of guilt when I travel. And yeah, you just deal with it, and again, it's a lifestyle. Back to that lifestyle point. My husband picks up the slack a lot. My kids know that I work a lot, and I'm doing fun things, and I'm doing great things for the family. And the goal is that we'll all be better off in the long run. You have to keep that in mind.
It's a tough question to answer. I mean, at the end of the day, I think you've got to prioritize what's important to you. I know that for us, for instance, in the sales and BD role that we just hired, we ensured that that person could travel because I'm just not willing to do it as much as I would normally. That said, I don't have the guilt if I travel, which isn't rare. I'm kind of like, wow, all right, this is like a vacation, right? But similarly, like I try and get home at 6 o'clock, have the 2 hours and be present during those 2 hours, and then get back on my computer at that particular time. And you know, my kids are really young right now, so you know, this may sound really bad, but I was talking about this with my wife the other day. Like, I could not be home more than I'm home right now. Like, I can't deal with the chaos. You know, the weekend is great, and then I'm happy to get to work on Monday morning. Because it's just hard at home, right? Like, it's easy coming into work. It's much easier than being home with 3 kids, 6 and under. It's just easier.
So the moral of the story
Maybe
is
I'm not supposed to say any of this, but like, start a business, like, not be home as much as possible. No, I'm just kidding. But I think, you know, a lot of it comes down to the fact that, to your point before of buying in, I just wasn't happy when I wasn't an entrepreneur, right? And so if you're living a life where you're not truly fulfilled, kids pick up on that, right? And so I involve them in the journey. I tell them what's going on at work. They know our URL, you know, like, you got to involve them in the process so that they, I hope to set an example for my kids of like, go do what you want to do. And hopefully that message will resonate with them.
You know, it's interesting because I have 3 kids as well, although I'm older than the other people on the stage. So I have 3 rep hockey players, 2 girls and a boy. So you guys have younger kids, obviously, at this point in time. Enjoy it. Because as you get older, it's, because I love what I do as well, in terms of having been an entrepreneur and now helping entrepreneurs. I love what I do. And my kids, when you try to share what you do, they just roll their eyes. And if somebody says to me, what do you do for a living? They go, oh, don't ask. So I'm waiting.
She'll go into the elevator pitch, right?
Wait till you guys hit that stage. It'll be more fun. So how do you manage you know, you talked a lot about the family. How do you manage the financial risk? You know?
Hope for the best.
You just hope for the best? Is it just, it keeps you up at night?
You know what, I think the risk of starting a company like G-Shift today is probably less than investing in the stock market.
All right. I'll give you that one.
I think that, you know, in order to be an entrepreneur, you need to take a risk, so you can't really have it both ways. That said, I think there's a lot to be said about calculated risk. So in the case of Sweet Spot, it was a very low investment startup. You know, it's a publishing site, and especially these days, you know, a monkey can create a blog and it doesn't cost that much. And it was selling advertising, so you're not actually producing something before it's spent. So I was very cautious and didn't spend a lot. I relied on viral communications and partnerships, and I was able to be very careful. In this situation with Deluxe, it's a very capital-intensive business with inventory and warehousing, logistics, more employees, and so it is a lot riskier. And I guess, you know, try to get other people's money more than your own. You know, but you have to put money on the table to show that you're serious, and so you have to really believe that your idea has merit, because you have to be willing to kiss the money goodbye. And if you can't afford to, then you shouldn't be investing it.
Yeah, and I think it too, if you're thinking of starting a business and entering into this entrepreneurial world, to set an amount that you're willing to part with, that you
like
can
gambling.
kiss goodbye.
Yeah.
And when you get there, stop. and really reevaluate what you're doing. Don't keep going. Don't remortgage the house. Don't like go and borrow a ton of money. If the business isn't working, you need to stop. And so in the case of G-Shift, I mean, I had a previous exit, so I had some seed money to start, and so did my co-founder. So it was much easier the third time around in terms of the startup costs. But we did have a goal in mind that we were going to write checks for this amount of money, and if it wasn't working out by that amount of money and that time, then we really had to reevaluate the commercialization aspect of the business and really what we were doing. But luckily we didn't have to do that because we got funded and we're well on our way.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is just like, so for me, I had to sort of convince my wife as she was going on the third mat leave, she works full-time as well, that this was a really good idea to sort of give up my day job and start a business. And I think, so to the point of calculated risks, you know, I went out and got a consulting job that I knew that I could do for 6 months while still using my name to promote my own company without having to worry about, you know, the dynamics of having a full-time job. So, you know, I really sort of calculated the risks and said, this is how long we can last and not really have to change our lifestyle all that much. And then, you know, with investors, you've got to be open with them that, you know what, you've got a young family and you can't work on mac and cheese money. I mean, it's just not going to work for you. And so if they want to back a company that has older sort of co-founders with family responsibilities, that's one of the things they've got to put up with, is that you need a salary. And I think, you know, the people in the valley or whatever that are 25 and can live on that mac and cheese money, good for them. But I can't and I won't. And so, you know, that's got to be part of the equation that you talk with your investors about.
So I'm going to take this on a slightly different tact and ask you, as entrepreneurs, what's your most difficult personal challenge? Something you had to overcome? Was it a skill you were missing? Do you hate pitching? It's like, what is it that you really, because not everybody comes with the whole, you know, being an entrepreneur means you have to do everything, not just those you're good at or that you like to do.
Shall I go first? So I have many things I'm missing, but one of them is, you know, over the last 6 months or so, really learning patience. So patience is not my strong suit by any stretch of the imagination. And I think when you're in a sort of high-risk growth sort of company like ours that's requiring outside capital in order to make it so, you're constantly pushing about this new thing, that new thing that will sort of drive your growth. And we've come to a stage now where, quite frankly, we just need to, we've grown so much that we need to take the time to sort of go back through the product and go back through the code and refactor it and all of these kinds of things that just are terrible, right? Like, there's so much innovation going on out there that you're constantly wanting to push, and it's not always the best strategy. And so this time period for me of learning patience and learning to, you know, really trust what the developers are saying and the problems that we're having and listen to your customers and all those kinds of things, it's not naturally what I want to be doing, and it's been a huge learning curve for me that it's not always forward faster, that at times you have to sort of circle back and go, I've got to sort of make sure that this engine that we've got can take us, you know, as far as we want to go.
Christa?
So one thing that I was missing, I like the patience. Yeah, lack of patience. For me, it was, I did a lot of pitching. So I calculated that I did 40 pitches in 20 months on both sides of the border. And some of those investment pitches were much more serious than others. But it really takes a lot out of you when investors just want to tell you what they think is the matter with your business and your pitch, and just the resilience. You just need to just stand there and shake your head and smile and say, okay, I'll go work on that. So just the patience, and I remember feeling like at any moment I could just blow up, but just calming down and really learning how to be calm in situations like that, because this is your idea, this is your baby, and you think everything is perfect about it already, but what you realize is that it's really not, and that the idea is an evolution, and it takes all of the input, good and bad, from all of these different sources over 20 months, 40 pitches on both sides of the border to get to that right investor that's going to just sit there and say, I love it, I'm in. So it all sort of plays together. So patience in a different way and more understanding.
But haven't you made a mental note of those people? Like, I got a checklist of people that I'm like, I'm going to prove these people wrong.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I actually like when people reject me, because then I'm like, this is going to get going.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you know what? In the grand scheme of things, the investors that we have at the table, they're the perfect, right investors for G-Shift, and they're wonderful to work with. And I'm not just saying that. Right? We're funded by Mars IIF. But it really does take a lot of effort and patience to find that right money.
So I have a number of things. One thing for me is I went into publishing with Sweet Spot and retail with Deluxe, and I had no experience in either. So those were personal challenges just to learn those industries, but I actually really enjoyed that. The two that tie for first place, Kirk's laughing because I already told this to him, but the one. So asking people for money and firing people are the two things that when I became an entrepreneur, I've really challenged my sort of core of having to step outside my comfort zone. With the asking for money with Sweet Spot, like I said, it was self-funded, so I never had to do the fundraising dog and pony show, and I'm doing it right now. And I was saying to Kirk before this that it's been painful for me to do it, but I know when it's over, I will be proud of myself for doing it and learning this skill and accomplishing it. Firing people, when I worked in advertising and someone wasn't doing their job, it was HR's problem. And now I've had to fire people, and in Sweet Spot and in Deluxe, and I would say it hasn't gotten any easier. I've probably gotten better at detaching myself from it, but I will say it's something I don't know that anyone would enjoy doing it, but it still makes me very uncomfortable, but I know it comes with the job.
So I'm going to open up the mics for people in the audience. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask somebody on the panel. We have one.
Wow, that was fast.
Quick question on, I wonder if you could talk, this question is for all three panel members. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about when you may have made a strong mistake, a really strong mistake, and you were able to flip that mistake to an opportunity.
Are you guys trying to pick which mistake?
Yeah, which mistake do we want to talk about? Oh, actually, because hiring is on the table, we made a couple of hiring mistakes. Sort of about 12 months into G-Shift. And if I can say something, I actually don't mind firing people, so next time you want to fire somebody, call me. Because it's so important to kill that mistake. It's like, this is the wrong fit, I'm sorry, and I blame it on myself. I hired the wrong person, this is just not going to work, let's end it.
It's not you.
Especially it's not you, it's me. Especially in a startup when resources are so scarce. I mean, if you've hired the wrong person, just deal with it right away. So hiring mistakes, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've all made lots of those.
Yeah.
There.
I don't have anything else that comes to mind. Or things that I'm supposed to say on stage in front of a webcam.
Well, I alluded to the partnership, structuring things a certain way, and I think it's sort of with hiring the wrong people. The minute you see you're in a situation like that, you have to do everything you can to fix it. And the lesson I learned was I kept for a while thinking the problem would just go away, it would change, and ultimately wasn't going to change until I was aggressive about it and being confident in what I was bringing to the table, and being willing to walk away if it wasn't ideal. That's actually the biggest lesson I learned is my choice is to stay in a situation that is settle for a situation or be in a situation that I actually feel good about. And I know that I have to be in a situation I feel 100% about.
So I actually have one. I remembered one. Sorry. And I think this is important for everybody is you know, if you're doing business with a friend or somebody like a close associate, just try and make sure, although it's not natural, to document everything at the beginning. You know, for James and I, we honestly never thought we were going to build a business that had, you know, $7 million in funding. And so, you know, we probably could have done a better job documenting things between us that would have led to fewer conversations down the road about what this should have meant or that should have meant. And so if you can, spend the time and document things at the beginning, because you never know where it's going to go.
I have a question for Kirk and Joanne, I think mostly. So just with funding in general, I've sort of been reading and following Jay Adelson from DIG and how he got funded and what he usually does to get the funding and so forth. His sort of suggestion is not to really write a formal business plan, but I just want to know if you guys either agree with that or not, because I'm finding some investors, particularly ones who want to, in Canada, more than the United States investors, want to see like a 30-page, 40-page business plan that you've gone through and just planned everything out. So you just kind of hand to them and they invest. What's your experience been like?
Sure, Chris has raised lots of money too. So,
Cool.
Do you want me to,
All three of them.
Go ahead?
I haven't written a business plan, so I can tell you that. I guess in my situation, though, sweet spot, I didn't raise money, so I didn't have to prove myself to anyone. And even when I got involved with Rogers, they weren't looking for the business plan because I already existed. So they were looking more for my metrics. They're looking for a story more than I think they're looking for the business plan. And now with Deluxe, no one has yet to ask me for a business plan. Go ahead.
So we wrote a business plan, and it's so not natural for me to write a business plan, but at the same time, I do think there's something valuable in the exercise, even if it's just for your own way of sort of clarifying your thoughts. I certainly think it's much more important at the seed stage than it is at the later stage. I mean, once you're walking in with proven metrics and you can dive deep into what your business is actually doing, it becomes less valuable. But unless you're walking in with a really, really good idea of exactly what your business is and can answer every single question about you know, how you're going to execute and who are the competitors in the space and all that kind of stuff, I don't see the harm in writing a business plan personally. I think it's a good exercise just in terms of your own mental discipline and putting it down on paper. Whether or not they ask for it or not, I'm not sure you've lost any time in that equation. One guy's perspective.
Yeah, and I can echo that. I wrote a business plan right out of the gate, but it was mostly for me. But I did get asked for it, both in Canada and the US.
As did I.
And I don't know if anybody ever read it, but I always had, you know, if somebody wanted that 30-page business plan, I had it. If they wanted just the financial projections, I had it. I had everything. You know, whenever anybody was ready to listen to me, I had it.
To your point of whether or not they're reading it, they might be asking you just to see if you're disciplined enough to write it.
Yeah.
They might never read it, but I don't see a harm in writing it.
And one more thing, when you went to stateside, did you incorporate in the States to get funding there, or you just sort of sold it as a Canadian company and then?
Sold it as a Canadian
Well, I know
company.
you did, yeah.
Sold it as a Canadian company and was not negotiable about whether or not we were moving down to the States to set up office or anything like that. It was never a question. They didn't ask. They invested in Canadian money. And we sort of sold them on some of the benefits of Shred and FedDev and those kinds of things, but definitely a Canadian company.
Okay, I'm going to go to the, do we have some questions? No? Okay, so, yep.
Okay, so I guess this question's primarily for Sweet Spot. Joanna, is it? I've actually heard of Sweet Spot. My ex-girlfriend was an intern. So it's
Was
fun.
she the one that was fired? No, sorry.
By the way, we call it letting it go, letting them go. It's not fired anymore.
I couldn't resist, sorry.
But, you know, if there's any other contributions to this, I'd love to hear them. I'm wondering how you grew your brand sort of from zero to hero, especially when you kind of have to balance creating content and not really, at least in the beginning stages, having anybody actually read the content. So how did you kind of snowball?
It's a good
What was your
question.
strategy?
So I always tell people lately when I've been talking about the days of starting Sweet Spot that in 2004, it's hard to believe it wasn't that long ago, there was no Facebook and no Twitter. If I'd had those, probably have a lot more subscribers. But I really, because I had no budget, also took a very viral approach. So in the early days, I literally just told all my friends by email about this thing, had them sign up, had them tell their friends, did a number of refer a friend contests. And then the biggest way that I built the database before Rogers came on board, then it was obviously easy, and I'm doing that now with Deluxe, is through strategic partnerships. So partnering with like-minded companies who target similar audiences and doing cross promotions and different content sharing or whatever it is. So in the example of Deluxe, we've partnered with American Express, giving American Express card holders certain benefits at certain times of the year, which in turn allows them to blast it out to their database, which is much larger than ours. With the case of Sweet Spot, we partnered with Rethink Breast Cancer, who has a huge database and targets the exact same audience as us. And those things can be hugely successful with very little cost.
How do you position that strategic partnership when essentially you have a lot less to offer than your strategic partner? I'm sure they're aware of the fact that your database is much smaller.
Right. So I think two things. One is that you try to bring something to the table that's of value to them. It doesn't always have to be equal. So if it's something that is of value to them and it doesn't really take a lot of skin off their back, they don't really have much to lose, even if it's not tit for tat. And also I think if they believe in the future opportunity as well, that there may not be that much in it for them today, but a year from now they're going to want to come to you.
Okay, well, thank you. That really helps.
I think we have one question.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions from
Okay.
webcasting. One is from Lena, and she asks, other than the elevator pitch and financials, what are the top 3 things that investors should know about your company?
Other than the elevator pitch and financials, what are the
So
top
what
3
sorts
things?
of things should you tell investors about your company? What are they looking for?
Traction, absolutely. They want to understand that you have traction, even very early out of the gate. So definitely traction, as well as, they want to understand the competitive landscape and how you're different, your value proposition. How are you different? That's the big question.
I would say, I don't know if you guys have gotten this a lot too, but to me it always comes down to the management team. A lot of them will say to you, we are investing in you as in me, Joanna, my team, because at the end of the day, a great idea is only as good as the people behind it.
Yep.
And the market size you're going after.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Another-
investors typically. Oh, go ahead.
And another question, this question is for Kirk. Somebody from Toronto is asking that, that they were wondering how you decided on a free accounting program. What led you to that idea?
Oh, that's a long story, but I think, James and I just came to it because of our backgrounds. He knew what small business owners were going through. I was really interested in sort of new apps in the cloud, and it was a natural sort of fit for us. In terms of free, I think this is a really good example of, we were going to go to market with a monthly subscription fee like everybody else, and we just started to see where the market was going and the type of data we were beginning to collect, and just thought to ourselves, there's a much, much bigger opportunity in free. And it was a really difficult, heated conversation for a couple days to decide to really sort of pivot to a whole different model. Best decision we ever made by far, and I think it's an example of you really need to be open to looking and making changes based on what you're seeing in the marketplace, because you rarely get it right the first time.
And one last question, and then I'll give it back to the floor, is this is a question that we actually had asked last week in our intro to marketing as well. When you're researching the customer and getting to know, doing preliminary research on your market, how do you know about who you should disclose information to, when to use an NDA, and when to go in good faith? So some people are afraid of sort of talking about their secret sauce and wondering how you make that decision of talking about what you're building to who, especially when you're trying to get feedback from your customer in the early stages.
Yeah, so we started talking to our prospects and target markets very early on, never once asked anybody for an NDA. Investors will not sign an NDA. It'd be silly to ask. So it's really about, I wouldn't even call it a leap of faith, it's just business. And you have to be confident that your idea is so unique and so solid and the right people are behind it that it doesn't matter. Because the general public isn't going to go and take your idea and launch the same business, because it takes an entrepreneur with the guts, with the resources, and the know-how to get it done.
Yeah, my COO, who is also a lawyer, who is also my sister-in-law, has always said that the NDA isn't worth the paper it's written on. So, because if someone wants to steal your idea, they're going to steal it. And I think everything that Christa said, if your idea is as unique as you think it is, and if you're the right person to be running it, it's not going to matter.
Plus, in the early days, you really hiring a lawyer to go after them? I mean, you can't afford to hire a programmer, let alone a lawyer.
I think there is one caveat, though, which is if you are filing for IP.
That's different.
So that's the only caveat, is if you do think that there's something patentable in the idea, the technology, or the business process, just get good advice on disclosure. That's the only time I think you have to worry about it at all.
Yeah.
And I think trust your gut about who you talk to and who you don't talk to about the specifics of it, based on their track record, based on your feeling of when you're talking to them and the value they can bring and the advice that they give you back.
So maybe we'll go here for another question.
Yes, I have two questions. The first question is for all three panelists, but specifically Joanna. Times and times again, everybody told me that it's very important to have a co-founder. But Joanna, if I get you right, you don't have a co-founder?
Well, I do, but he's more just of a more passive. He's on the board, and he was one of our biggest investors.
So if you did not have a co-founder, would you think that you would be successful?
Yes. I think that, like I said, I think these guys have good stories about having partners and co-founders, and my alternate philosophy is that sometimes you think you need that partner when really you just need to outsource a task or a consultant, or you need to hire an employee. I don't think that the partner co-founder is the be-all, end-all solution.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I mean, I never would have gotten to this point without a co-founder, but that doesn't mean that every situation, because he knows accounting and he knows, what to build and all that kind of stuff, but that does not mean that every situation requires a co-founder. If you've got a great idea and you think you can execute it and you can hire the people to help you get the vision, keep 100% of the shares, because you'll be giving a lot of them away down the road if you need to raise money.
That's great. And my second question is about getting buy-in from the spouse. All three of you have a spouse. I do have one. So can you give me more tips on how to get buy-in from your spouse? Because my husband is bugging me.
Yeah.
A bottle of wine.
Yeah. My strategy was just to keep bringing it up, like to eventually just wear her down to the point where living with me, like just wearing her down was no fun. So ultimately she said, okay.
Any tips from Joanna and Christa, from the ladies?
My husband is also an entrepreneur, so from that perspective, he already gets it, and he understands that spirit. And truth be told, he pushed me into the second one. I'm like his, the horse, and the jockey. He was like, you got to do it, you got to do it. I think he's had a few moments of regret when he's putting my son to bed every night. But I think I was in a fortunate situation where he was on board probably before I was.
Awesome. And my story goes something like this. My husband's a lawyer. He has an MBA in finance, and he's an engineer. And so he was really the first guy who listened to the pitch, and he did the same thing. Well, how big is the market? How are you different? What's your value proposition? And I was able to essentially convince him that this was a good idea, plus track record, plus he knew I wouldn't be happy. I mean, I'm not going to be happy going to work for somebody else. So really, that was it.
That's great. Thank you.
Very interesting reflections. Thank you for that. My question is more on the talent side. I would like to know if there is some specific skill that you find it difficult to find here in the people you want to hire.
Good question. Anybody want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of experiences as of late is you can find people who have the exact skill set that you're looking for, and you know, they're good on paper per se, but they don't have the stomach for a startup.
Yeah.
And I've seen that a few times, and it's really, they're accustomed to the corporate setting, they like to have the fences and the parameters and the manual and the rule book, and they just are too far outside their comfort zone to deal with the roller coaster that is a startup. And I think it doesn't, I always say it doesn't make you a bad person. You know, the world needs people to work at big corporations, but either you kind of have it or you don't.
So similar to that, one of the things that we're really trying to sort of get to the bottom of in an interview process is, are we interviewing somebody who understands that on one day you could be doing, you know, if we're hiring a VP marketing, on one day you could be building the advertising plan, and on the next day you could be down in the muck doing it. And to your point, it's easy to find the people that on paper can put together the marketing plan. It's really hard to get the type of person who understands that I'm going to get a nice title and all those kinds of things, but I've got to get down into the muck and do the nitty-gritty. And I think that's one thing that you need to find at startups is people who understand that you're not going to sit around a board table and say that's not my responsibility, because we're not hiring somebody to do that, you're doing it too. And in terms of specific like talent gaps, I think the one thing that I've heard from almost every US VC that I've been in front of is that Canada doesn't have enough of the really senior online marketing people. And I think in some ways that's played out in my look around the market. I think we're doing really well on the developer side in Toronto versus the Valley or versus New York, where it's a lot more competitive. But on senior level marketing roles, there's a general perception that we don't have enough really sort of A talent. Because in the Valley, you can pick up guys who have done it before for Facebook or Twitter or Zynga or, you know, any of the big guys. And in Canada, we just haven't had that many success stories of companies. Had lots of success stories, but not a lot of success stories of companies that have gone really, really big. Generally, the ecosystem, maybe you'll disagree with me, Christa, but generally the ecosystem has kind of sold out at the early stage. And good for them. I'd say, you know, if you can make really good money, then you got to have that option. But we need some companies to take it further and spawn off a number of really talented people who have done it before.
I don't have anything to add. Those were wonderful thoughts. Actually, that's not true. When G-Shift hires somebody, we really, really try to find what I call an intrapreneur. And it's really what you're both describing, which is people who belong in startups and who can create and be part of the vision and not have to come to work every day and get the answers. They are willing to look for the answers. That's really, really important in a startup.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. I want to ask you a question. What measures do you have in place or do you take to retain your key employees, especially during the first 4 or 5 years of your startup? The reason I'm asking is I've been part of 3 tech startups, but not in Canada, in a different country, and I guess the problem is quite universal.
I didn't catch the last part there. Is what?
What measures do you have in place?
Yeah, no, so the last part of your question. Did you catch the last part? The very last part. You said, I've been at 3 tech startups and the problem
And I guess the problem is quite universal.
in terms of keeping good people.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have an employee stock option plan. All employees get options. I think 15% of the company has been reserved for that, which is really key, I think. So not only is my co-founder an equity holder, a significant equity holder, but 2 of our primary, or our first hires actually also bought into the company. Small amount, but they actually wrote checks. So they are key. They have written checks, and then I think after that, it comes down a lot to culture of the organization, and you can do things like employee benefit plans, which are typically done, I know, in software industries and usually quite healthy. So things like that, that's what we're doing at this point in time, keeping in mind that we're only 2 years old, so we're not 5 years down the road. And when we have to go from 12 people that we are now to 50, what is that going to look like, and how are we going to retain those people? That might be a different problem for me, but what we're doing really works now, and we have a really close-knit team.
Yeah, I would add to that. To me, when you're a startup, you don't have a lot of money and things to throw at people as far as perks. And what I've really always believed in is the culture. I make a commitment to anyone who works for me to make sure that it's the most rewarding experience of their life. That might not be the easiest one, but they know that they're going to learn a lot and they're going to be part of something great. And we work in a very flexible environment, and we try to do fun things and give people, interesting experiences. For example, just last week we had someone come in who's an executive coach who happens to be the husband of someone we know, and he came in and gave sort of a 90-minute motivational speech, and that's the kind of thing. If they wanted to go to a conference or something and listen to it, it would cost hundreds of dollars, and we brought them to us. So just little things along the way that make people realize that maybe they want to leave for more money, but they're not going to find an experience like this anywhere else.
Thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, my question's for the entire group, but Joanne in particular, because I'm in kind of the similar situation as you. I work at an ad agency in Toronto, and I'm an account executive. And I just kind of want to know when you guys got out of your day job and went fully and dove into your idea completely.
So for me, I was working in advertising, and I started Sweet Spot, and what I was able to do, which if you work in advertising would know is probably very rare, and I got lucky, was I had been there for 6 years, and I went to the managing director and I basically said, here's the thing, starting this business, I don't know where it's going to go or how long it's going to take off, but you can either have half of me or none of me. And I had been a valued employee. I'd put in my time and made, a great reputation for myself. And he at the time said, okay, I'll take half of you. So I ended up working there half the time and then spent the other half of my days working on Sweet Spot. And when it started to hit to that point where I knew if I don't give Sweet Spot my all, it's never going to take off, I had to take the plunge and jump ship.
How long were you able to do that for?
6 months. But it wasn't easy. I joke I was working at the ad agency 50% of the time and at Sweet Spot 100% of the time, so the math doesn't work out. Yeah.
I think in your gut when it's time. When you feel like you're at the precipice of something with your company and it's just time to give it a shot. I think only you know at that particular time in your gut that it's the right time to do it. And great story to go and you lack confidence, don't you? I love it. I went and I said, you can have half of me or none of me. And he took half. I love that story.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think try and find, and I found a consulting gig that worked for me. I think try and find something that works and just rely on your gut to know when's the right time to give it a shot.
Ditto.
Okay, great.
And if you want somebody else's money, you're going to have to be full-time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just an important benchmark.
So I'm curious to know, in terms of an exit strategy, at what point when you started the company did you lay out a very clear exit strategy and that changed over time? And at what point do you exit that particular business, given the economic cycles that we're in right now in particular?
Christa.
Yeah. I had an exit strategy for G-Shift right from the beginning of the concept of G-Shift. That doesn't mean I wake up every morning and think about it. It's about building the business. But in my mind, G-Shift is part of a larger digital marketing ecosystem, and I know it fits in nicely to a couple of different places. That hasn't changed at all in 2 years?
I think that's a good answer. I think that, to your point about you don't think about it every day, but when you're putting together the business and thinking about the type of business you want to be in, and especially if you're going to go get VC funds, they don't want to be in a business for 15 years, right? Typically. You better be thinking about, is anybody on the other end going to be interested in your business? So I think it's got to be part of the setup process in terms of the type of business you want to sort of grow. And then having not exited one, I don't know when the right time is. And again, I go back to the thought that we discussed before, which is I think you've got to go on your gut as to how you're feeling at that particular moment and how the board's feeling and how your co-founder's feeling and how the team's feeling and sort of determine what's right and what's wrong.
Thank you.
Hi, after this I'm actually going to meet somebody who sells t-shirts and is trying to start their own t-shirt label. So this is a question on their behalf. When you're entering the online retail environment, what are the biggest challenges you face and how do you overcome those challenges?
So I think, well, I don't know that this only applies to online retail, but retail in general. For us, one of the biggest challenges is managing inventory. We take inventory risk. We buy the inventory, which is unlike these flash sale models that people are seeing a lot, these designer discount sites. They're not taking inventory. They're getting the commitment from the consumer, and then they're going back and buying the inventory, which allows them to have a very good cash situation, but it puts a strain on the customer experience because the customer has to wait 2-3 weeks to receive the merchandise, and most people shop for instant gratification. So I know that that's a challenge in the flash sale business. The flip side for me is I'm sitting on a lot of inventory. I think that is really a huge challenge. And then I guess the challenge of being an online retailer versus bricks and mortar is I don't get to be face to face with my customers. So you need to tell the whole story and bring that product to life in a one-dimensional sort of way. And the way we overcome that is to try to provide as much information as possible. So details on the product, size and fit, size charts. In our case, like we merchandise the product with other products, so this is what it's worn with. And our magazine on our site is a huge component too. That's the way we can inspire people and bring it to life in a way, if they can't see it, feel it, touch it, that they can almost feel like they got to know the product without being there.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Jeff Fung, and I started an online platform that helps people to find and connect with lawyers called MyLawBid. It's at www.mylawbid.com. My question is, when should you start looking for investors? And the next part of the question is, who can you go to practice your pitch and get actual feedback?
Mars?
Mars, yeah.
Good answer.
I have a question for you. Why would anybody want to connect to a lawyer?
Well,
Don't
hopefully
answer.
fine for legal services, but I won't answer.
I get your model. It's good. So we started G-Shift July of '09. That's the incorporation date on the company. We sort of started really showing up at an office and writing the business plan towards the end of July. And in August, I met with the first potential investor. And from that point on, it was my job to seek out investors and anybody who would listen to me pitch. And in terms of who you can practice your pitch, yeah, Mars has people who will help you with that. I went through their program. It's very helpful. If you're not close to Mars, if you're somewhere else, I mean, Venture Lab, Innovation Factory, all of these RICs have tons of people who will help you, and you should take advantage of them.
Thank you.
I think every situation's different in that I think you were probably able to raise money because you'd had an exit before. If you haven't had an exit before and you don't have a track record, you got to probably get farther in the process like I had to do before people would, were interested in talking to us. My advice is always take it as far as you can on your own dime so that your sort of pre-money valuation and that kind of stuff is as good as you can get it. And definitely don't do it when you're almost out of cash because it's always going to take you longer than you think.
Thanks.
Good evening. I currently run our website, netrenos.com. It's netrenos.com. We connect homeowners with qualified contractors. And I want to know, because you guys run websites, what was your big challenge in terms of overcoming the problems of getting to the masses? Because some days I'm in a suit and I'm meeting contractors. Some days I'm in a sweatshirt with my branding and handing out flyers. And Canadians are very conservative and they're sometimes kind of weird. I mean, but some people often are like, no, thank you. And I'm like, give me 10 seconds to tell you what I do before you know thank you. You know what I mean? So I want to know, how do you guys overcome those challenges? If you had to do direct street marketing, if you had to do online, Facebook, Twitter.
So how do you get to the masses? How do you get to your customers en masse? Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out. It's one of my biggest challenges right now, and I try to figure it out every single day with my marketing team. And our challenge is one that we are a new category, and so our target market doesn't yet know that they need us. So it's very difficult to market to them. The way we're getting around that is through a PR strategy and education and getting other people to write about us, and that's really working. So it really is constantly, and this is for all parts of the business too, understanding what's working and what's not working and reacting to that. So how do I tweak it? What do I know? What do I not know? How can I tweak my model, marketing, sales, whatever it is, on a daily basis to figure it out? I heard a great, one of my board members said something the other night, and I love it. You can't scale it till you nail it. Until you totally nailed your model, you cannot scale the company.
And in terms of like radio, print, and TV, do you prefer any? Would you use any?
It depends how your customers are buying.
Okay.
So it really depends on your target market and where they hang out, what they listen to or read or buy. Yeah, Mars can help you with this stuff, right?
But Joanna's answer around channel partnerships is like oftentimes the best way to go, right?
Like strategic partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
like, so
I
find
agree.
somebody in your space who,
Home Depot, maybe.
yeah, use the hustle that you're using on the street and take it to like channel partners and spend more than 10 seconds, because they'll give you more than 10 seconds convincing them of why you want to do it. I mean, until we built our integrations with a couple of Google platforms, we were having a hard time getting the word out too. Like, it's just, the channel partners are like the best way to go.
And getting over those gatekeepers, sorry, but the gatekeepers that you might bump into.
Knock down the barriers, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, is knock down the barriers as best as you can.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anton, and I have a question to all of you. All of your business are for profit. If you wanted to open up an organization that is for non-profit, how you will find investors?
Wow.
That's, if you can sell an investor on a nonprofit,
So maybe
we're hiring.
I think I might be more helpful than you guys on this, because none of you are social entrepreneurs. There's a whole new way of social impact investing that has to do with foundations and a different way of doing the not-for-profit. There's lots of places around the city that can help you on the not-for-profit side in terms of figuring out. That's what foundations are for, and a lot of existing government funds. There's a new, actually going to be listed in, it's going to be operational in, I think, January, which is the Social Venture Exchange, which is a new stock market-like exchange for companies that have double and triple bottom lines, which is that they want to be for-profit as well as social, have social impact and measure it as a key driver. So there's a whole, one of the things, if you go to the Mars website, that's one of the things that it's very, very full of, is some information around that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm not a
We're
panelist,
not
but I don't have the
people.
answers. I thought I'd be a little bit more helpful there.
That's good.
Hi, my name's Eva, and I have a website. It's just kidding, I know. My question is about valuation and your value proposition, and the absolute fear from watching Dragon's Den of going up and getting completely shot down. So how much data do you collect, and how do you come up with a realistic value proposition for your business when you're a startup?
You know what I loved about something I read online, I forget where it was, about valuation is like looking at it from a really simplistic perspective, which is how much money do I need to raise? What does the VC want generally at a seed round or an A round? And therefore, what's the valuation? So if I'm raising $500,000 and the VC wants 25%, then I probably need a pre-money valuation of like 2. And you know, oftentimes it just comes down to that calculation. It's not like Dragon's Den where you're sitting there and they're like, what's your valuation? And then you got to throw it out and they're like, no! It doesn't happen that way, you know, like it's much more of an organic conversation around it. So, you know, I think reverse engineer what you think the sort of ballpark is by putting your ego aside and saying, you know, this is generally how the market works. And the other thing is that I think you learn over time that valuation is only one of the important metrics. And it's easier said than done, but you really have to take your ego out of the valuation and say, if I have 60% of a company that's got like the best VC possible or the best investor possible, what's my upside going to be versus if I have 75% of a company with a terrible partner? You know, valuation is only one small part of the equation, and I think, you know, we succumb to that too, right? You want the best possible valuation. You want to be able to say, wow, our first seed round was done at this and our Series A was done at that, but it's only one part of the equation.
We're going to go to a question online.
Yep. So we've just got a couple minutes left, so we'll take maybe one question from the webcasters and one more online, and then if you have any more questions, we'll bring the speakers out into the atrium where there's some snacks and a cash bar, so we can continue the conversation there. The question from the webcaster was, to all the speakers, if you had a chance to start all over again, your most current businesses, what would you do differently, if anything?
I would raise more money at the beginning, for sure.
I wouldn't change a single thing.
That's good. I have a lot of little tweaks that I would have done. Nothing too dramatic, but and nothing that I really want to speak of here, but just little things along the way that I wish I had done this way or that way, and certainly would do the next time, but nothing too dramatic.
I have a question about, or it's actually for those of you that sought out venture capital funding in both the US and Canada. Did you find there were major differences between the attitudes of the VC investors in the US and Canada? And did you find there was, well, I guess a lot of people are saying there are big differences in the availability of capital there versus here. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure. So, like as a general rule, striking differences between the two. And it was explained to me in the following way by a Canadian VC, and that is that, you know, if you're into some really top-tier VCs in the US, the amount of companies that they see on a daily basis in comparison to the number of companies a good VC sees in Canada is so drastically different that the questions they ask, the data points they're looking for, the key variables that they know that they've seen in 6 companies that have led to this, and the ones that they've seen in 94 companies that have led to that is so dramatically different that there is a big difference. And I remember during the early days of raising our seed round, the questions that I would get from some Canadian investors, like God bless them, but you know, really, really difficult, not difficult questions, questions that were just, like if you've got to ask me whether or not free registers with, you know, small business owners, I have to look at you and say, like, seriously? Free resonates with everybody. What you do with it after, I agree, is a whole different equation. But, you know, some of the questions were just, you're sitting there and you know within a couple of minutes, this is not going to be an investor in my company. And you get a lot less of that in the US. So for me, those were the biggest differences. And it's not to suggest there's not great capital here. There is. OMERS Ventures is a partner of ours. They've been fantastic, and we wouldn't be where we were without them. But as a general rule, there are big differences.
And I only have experience at the angel level, so I did a lot of not a lot, 5 or 6 angel pitches, and I found the US angels just so much more aggressive and willing to work with the entrepreneurs than, honestly, the Canadian angel groups. And maybe I'm way off, but that's just what I felt. To the point where pitching to a Canadian angel group, by no means do I mean to offend any Canadian angel groups, but it almost seems like they're looking for an excuse not to invest. Where the American angels are asking you questions, valid questions, but it's more like, we can figure this out together. This is early stage, you're in a new space, we can figure it out together. Where the Canadians are, oh, no, we don't want to do that.
That's a great
way of describing it.
That's a culture, though. That's the risk averse versus
that's a
the
great way
risk
of describing it. That they're looking for a way not to invest.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a whole big different mind shift.
Having said that, I do have 2 U.S. angels that did invest into G-Shift. So
we're going to take I'm going to go to the guy behind you, and that will be the last question. And then I am serious, and I'm not going to let them talk to you until you get outside.
My question is a very simple one. As a first-time entrepreneur, you've given us fabulous information, great facts, but for each of you, whether it's your current venture or something in the past, what was the major aha moment that, okay, I am where I'm supposed to be as an entrepreneur? Share that, because I have no clue, not having been in a venture before.
For me, it was when I got the call from the company that acquired my previous company. As I was walking out of the office, I walked by the main reception area. The phone was ringing. It was a number coming in from California, and I thought, I'm just going to leave. And I thought, no, I'm going to pick it up. Picked it up and had a wonderful conversation with a wonderful man who ended up buying the company. That was my aha moment.
For me, it was 1 year into Sweet Spot, and I had been doing this, out of my apartment, mostly by myself. At that time, I now had 1 other employee. It had been a very tumultuous road and a lot of work, and I did a 1-year survey to my readers to ask them, what do you like, what don't you like, how can we change this? And you get these online surveys and you check the boxes, and I admit myself that if I fill out an online survey, I never answer the open-ended questions. That would require too much work. So I'll tick the boxes, but I give one-word answers. And at the end of the survey, it said, just any other comments, please share. And it went out to, maybe it was 5,000 people at the time, and I think we got 600 responses. And I went through these, and I remember sitting at the desk in my tiny little apartment, I was crying like a baby. I couldn't believe these people were saying how much they love Sweet Spot, and how it's like they get excited when they wake up in the morning and go to their computer and they see the email, and it just brings a smile to their face, and it's just all this amazing feedback. And I just remember thinking, wow, I actually had an impact. I created a brand, like I said earlier. I created something from nothing, and people actually care about it. And even to this day, even though now I'm in a new business, it's like an aha moment every time. If I go somewhere, I'm, wherever I am, and people are like, oh, you're the Sweet Spot girl. I'm like, oh, sure, I'll be her. So, yeah.
Although now it must be when you see people with deluxe boxes in their desks.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
No,
your aha
it's okay.
moment. Go.
I was just going to say very briefly, for me, it was walking around the office when we had hired some people, and I knew that I was with a team of really, really smart people. And I love being around smart people who are doing interesting things. And so that was, anytime I get that feeling, I feel good about it.
Thank you to the 3 of you for sharing your story tonight. Good luck in your 3 ventures, because you're all at good places, but you still have roads to go, and we're hoping that all 3 of you are those next big Canadian successes that we can all point to and say held out for the big ones.
Awesome.
So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you.